This is the Bema Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today, I'm with Elle Fricks to unearth a deeper meaning of salt through a Talmudic lens.
That's right. We've been peeking through this window of the Talmud, a window into the early Jewish conversation that Jesus was more than likely drawing upon as he taught the text to his context. So, how in this particular section is he bringing new life to this pre-existing stream of thought conversation that's already been ongoing for hundreds of years? Would you read for us the verse from Matthew?
Yes, I will, in the Revised Standard Version upon your request. And
Great.
It is, I will point out, very convenient that you wanted to talk about this, because I did indeed read this, because we did every verse of Matthew. However, we gave precisely zero commentary on the idea of salt in our original pass. And I thought, did I miss that? Did I? But no, I think we just kind of lumped it all together with the light of the world, city on the hill. And, you know, I think obviously they are connected, but there's stuff to unearth, as you say, in the idea of salt. So we are in Matthew 5, verse 13, just this one little verse, and we're going to get a whole conversation out of it.
We sure are. And really mostly the first half. So
okay.
Take us away.
You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trodden underfoot by men.
Fantastic. Okay, so Bema might not have circled the wagons as of yet around this concept of being the salt of the earth. And yet, many of us have probably heard sermons that included this verse in it. And there's been some pretty fantastic pashats, as we say, right? Surface level, illustrations that use the idea of being salt. Do you have any favorites over time that stand out to you, Brent?
I'm trying to think if I've ever heard anything besides the idea of like, well, if it doesn't have salty taste, then how are you going to be distinctive and how are you going to be a flavor in the world or something like that?
Okay, interesting. Huh. Why wouldn't he have said you're the cumin of the earth or something then?
Sure, yeah.
I don't know. Interesting. Okay, I've heard a lot, just throwing some of them out there. I've heard that we are salt because the world is meat, and if you don't preserve meat, it goes bad, and so therefore God is going to destroy the world, and it's only by our presence that doesn't happen.
Okay.
You know, a dark vibe to start things off.
A meat world.
Right. The destroyer definitely is one of God's titles for sure, not Satan's titles. Okay, I've heard it makes things taste better, which sure, yeah. Sure. I've heard that it melts the ice, which there's not a lot of that in Israel, but
no.
Text to context.
Yeah, if that is a culturally relevant understanding of salt, then wow. Things have changed.
But in general, therefore, that God's people are supposed to make things safer for other people. I've heard that salt is a catalyst for chemical reaction because electrical current travels further in salt water, which is why we add salt to make things boil faster. I'm not exactly sure. I have heard this taught. I'm not sure what their endpoint was. Maybe like the spirit is supposed to be the electrical current or something.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure.
Not sure what their understanding of electrical currents and catalysts would have been at the time. Although I could definitely see perhaps an understanding of salt being added for boiling purposes. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure about what the parallel would be there, but that's one that I've heard. And also the awkward thing in that, right, is that salt can be corrosive and destructive. The Romans cursed and salted Carthage in North Africa in 146 BC, so previous to the time of Jesus, right? So it's also this destructive thing that Jesus references right in the second half of this verse, which we will get to the end. We're not just going to skip over that, but Kind of ironically to all of that, using salt as flavoring, I was reading in the Talmud, is kind of a Roman thing.
Also, like a presentism.
Oh, yes. Very good. Very good. Throwback presentism. Yes. And you can't make an argument about like, well, salt is very pure, which is another thing that I've heard, because the kind that they used to season food was mixed with black fish scales for umami. So it's not like it was, pure white refined thing that comes out of your salt shaker today.
Right.
They did, however, do a whole bunch of things with salt, according to Talmudic evidence, that you could make little peshots from with a less presentist perspective. So though it's not for ice, they would put salt on the ramp to the altar so that the priests wouldn't slip while they're hauling these giant carcasses around. A cow is pretty big and heavy, and you've got to get it up there, and you don't want to slip while you're trying to push an animal. That would be bad news. So if you want to try to make a parallel about how we're salt in that situation, you could say like, oh, well, we're supposed to support ministers so that they don't slip. I don't know. They rubbed newborn babies with salt. So you could spin something beautiful. Feels like a for money thing to talk about the earth as like a baby and we have to take care of it, right? If you go back to the creation narrative, told to guard, right, and work and protect the land. So there's that. And the third extraneous Talmudic use of salt that I found is if the horn of the altar is damaged, you can make a salt patch for it so that sacrifices can still take place. It can be like, if you want to try to bring out a peshat from that, it'd be something about how we make sure that reconciliation between God and humans is still possible, even when everything isn't as it's supposed to be. But those are just our introductory little fruit salad ideas. But you've only ever heard the one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was anything else, but it was always just about like, I think it was about like a distinctiveness, like be in the world, not of the world kind of thing. And yeah.
Because salt was rare?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. We'll let it go.
I think maybe because salt is like, it's noticeable. Like if there is salt or if there's, I don't know, if there's too much salt. I don't know. The analogy can break down pretty quickly in a variety of ways. But yeah, I think it was just everything I've heard about it has been about being distinctive and being like the flavor to the earth. And like, I don't know, if you become like the world, then you've lost your saltiness and you're no longer good for anything.
Huh. Okay. All right.
I guess we've been in different church circles.
Well, that's for sure. That is true. Okay. Well, I have to offer 4 different possibilities and then some takeaways. And you told me before we started recording that you've heard that there are 11 canon interpretations.
Well, I don't know about canon, but I was listening to the conveniently timed Bible Project series on the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh, nice.
When they talked about the salt one, they actually ended up tying it to covenants specifically. I don't know if we're going to talk about that as one of your items.
We are going to talk about that, yes.
But he said that there were 11 different potential interpretations for the usage of salt, and they ended up getting to the covenant one because they grouped it together with the light of the world sitting on a hill thing,
right?
Tied that into Isaiah, and then made some connections there to the sacrificial system and the covenant between Israel and God.
Absolutely. Okay, well, put that in the show notes, and I can learn alongside everybody else. That sounds great.
They did not mention all 11, so I don't even know what all they were talking about. They did mention the preservation idea,
okay,
specifically with sacrifices, but not the idea of using it to like keep the priests safe as they haul the stuff up to the altar. So that's a fun. I almost wonder if it's like hey, they're salting the thing anyway, and then they realize like, oh, I'm not falling all over the place as we do this. And so maybe they just like built that into the process. I don't know.
Well, I wasn't planning on getting into this, but the scene is complicated in that there are different types of salt. So the salt that's mostly used for the things I talked about earlier, like the rubbing babies and the putting it on the ramp, is lump salt or rock salt, which has a different word in Hebrew. I'm not sure about the Greek. Versus the salt for sacrifices has to come from a very specific place, which I'm so excited to talk about.
Okay.
So, jumping into number one, which you've just alluded to, what is the number one most important Jewish use for salt at this particular time?
I'm guessing then it's covenant or sacrifice.
Sacrifice. Okay. So Leviticus is very specific that offerings must be salted. All over the place, it'll say that this has to be the case. But Leviticus 2 specifically implies that this has to do with God's covenant with humanity. It specifically says the salt of covenant. So it's not like an illusion or something that's, extrapolated from, but it just says it. So I presume the Bible Project is talking about what exactly that means and which covenant they're referring to in Leviticus and etc. But staying in our Talmudic lane here, if we are the salt of the earth in this little parallelism, that implies that the earth is the sacrifice, right? And we are this covenantal piece sprinkled over it. That makes it holy before God. How would I know, or how am I saying that that's the point, that it makes it holy before God? Talmud says salt makes the sacrifice acceptable for offering, just as discipline purifies the whole body of a man. So we're making it acceptable before God. We're making it holy before God, right? We're setting it apart for something. And the way that you set it apart is by putting a whole bunch of salt on it. Again, according to Talmud, it has to be heavily salted.
You are the salt of the earth.
Yep.
But if we are salting the earth, then presumably that puts it on the ground, but that's bad because then it's being thrown out and trodden underfoot by men.
Well, both parts of Jesus's line here involve the earth, right? You are the salt of the earth. That seems to be a positive thing. But if you've lost your saltiness, then you're no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trodden underfoot. Which Epsom salt is a fertilizer, by the way, too. So I don't know enough about plant biology to know how all of that works. But you're not the first person to be confused. There's part of Talmud, actually, again, that mocks Jesus for this particular teaching and says salt cannot lose its saltiness. That's impossible, as impossible as a barren donkey having afterbirth, which, again, I don't... It's very specific, feels random to me. I'm sure they had a reason. But yes, you're not alone in your confusion about what Jesus is exactly trying to say there.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible Project guys were saying something similar. Like this whole section is kind of like a joke. Like, what do you mean salt losing its saltiness?
Right.
Then it's not actually salt. What do you mean putting a light under a bushel? Like, that's ridiculous. Nobody would ever do any of these things.
The absurdity of kingdom. Indeed.
Yeah, right.
Indeed. Good. Okay. So if salt makes the sacrifice acceptable for offering, right? And the earth here is the offering. This really reminds me of our blessing conversation that we had with Josh, talking about the spark that is latent within all things, and how when we align something with the intended purpose that God created it for, it brings out that spark. It elevates it. It sets it ablaze in a positive way that reconciles folks to God and one another, right? Because that's the purpose of a sacrifice. So it's to tell the people you and God are okay, and then also to make peace between neighbors. So the earth is the thing that's being set ablaze, the spark is coming out of, that its true meaning is elevated. We are the salt that marks it as holy, as good, as acceptable before God. Does that check out?
I like that image. Yeah.
Okay, great. There's a further layer to this image, which makes me happy. I talked a minute ago about different types of salt, the fish scale one, the lump rock salt. But the salt for sacrifices had to come from a very specific place. Can you guess where is a really salty part of Israel near Jerusalem. That would be handy if you were a priest.
This is terrible, but the first thing that came to my mind is Lot's wife.
Yes, you are on the right track there.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so we think of that story. That's where Sodom, the Amorah, is located, right? And then she runs off. There's a whole Bema episode about this, which is much better than my summary now. She gets turned to salt, and that's the legend of how the
Dead Sea?
The Dead Sea appears.
Okay.
So very specifically, the salt for sacrifices couldn't be from other places. We know Ostrakine was a city on the border of Egypt that was known for its salt production and exportation. It could not be from these other places. You couldn't get it from your spice traders or merchants. It had to be salt from the Dead Sea. But as you just alluded to, the origin story of the Dead Sea is something that first emerged out of darkness and out of chaos and out of sin and selfishness and violence, right? And so, how Jesus-esque, how miraculous, how almost resurrection-y is it that up floating out of the Dead Sea comes something that can be used for goodness and something that makes other things around it holy under when we're following the commandments of God, right? Out of the Dead Sea, out of this tragic story of Sodom and Amorah comes this key component of making relationship with God and one another right again.
A much more noble interpretation and usage of the situation than I was thinking. I was just like, wow, they're just like, oh, well, now that you're salt, I guess we might as well get some good out of you or something.
Yeah. Oh boy. Take a chunk. Take it back to your dead cow.
Also, I'm like, how is this like another Hanukkah sort of miracle where the one little bit of salt lasts for a very long time?
Forever. No, it is not. Yeah, the whole place supposedly got turned to salt. And also, you can read different travelers' accounts of like the different rock formations that are by the Dead Sea. And they claim like, oh, this one's totally Lot's wife, which is fun. You know, there's kind of like Arches National Park. There's some vaguely human looking rocks out there, and they're named like the Three Sisters, the same kind of deal. Okay, so that's our first take on what it means to be salt of the earth. We are given by God out of darkness, out of sin, out of deadness and selfishness, miraculously, something that becomes good, something that's added to the earth that makes it holy, makes it set apart, makes it acceptable to God. That's the first one. Number 2, interpretation.
I'm ready.
You're ready. All right. Here is a saying from Talmud. This one goes, the salt of money is charity. We'll walk through it.
Okay.
I like this one because it even kind of sounds like what Jesus says, right? The salt of the earth is you. The salt of money is charity. This is a common saying, apparently, because they were using it to extrapolate about other things. But this is the idea of the teaching salt of money is charity. You have something neutral, which is money, and it has the potential to bring destruction and ruin your life, right? Or to be enslaved by it or to trying to get more, etc. However, if we take this neutral thing and illuminate it, bring out its spark, right? Open the pathway to eternal life, adjacent to it, we can take the morally neutral money and salt it with generosity. Then suddenly we have unlocked the secret, the eternal value of money. So therefore, this one goes with the last one pretty well, in my opinion. If we're engaging with the earth, we are imbuing it with this kingdom value, which goes in perpetuity through eternity.
Okay.
It
sounds good. I was trying to think like if, somehow that like led my mind off into this thing about like the salt in our sweat and like the work that we do and how that's like, yeah, maybe the work of generosity. I don't know.
Yeah, that reminds me of the disciplining the body purifies the whole man thing from the last teaching. Maybe that's what it's talking about. Discipline isn't like hitting yourself, it's going on a run. Fascinating.
Well, I don't know about a run, but yeah. Yeah, like
Let's not get wild here.
working the ground,
Okay.
and we can tie this all back into the earth and everything else. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so when we engage with the earth, we're bringing in this eternal value like charity, like generosity. We're unlocking the goodness of the earth like a blessing and bringing up its eternal value before God.
Are there any other things besides money that on, at a typical thought would not bring to mind salt, but are salted in some way?
Not in my research, but that doesn't mean it's not out there.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Number 3. Bum, bum, bum. I like this one too. I like all of them. That's why I'm teaching them. So not a necessary comment. And yet here we are. Okay. Here's the saying from Talmud. Torah is the salt. Mishnah is the pepper. Gemara, which is the word for the rabbinical commentary, is the spices. Which, first off, before we get to anything real, that means if we say like we're getting spicy today, means we're getting into rabbinic commentary. Just very fun, according to this. And if you're sneezing, it's because you've had too much Mishnah. There you go.
Well, salt and pepper would generally be considered spices in like a broader sense, right? Or are they like completely distinct?
I think Gemara here being the spices, that's like turmeric and
right.
Palestinian oregano and the other things that they have out there.
But if you say spice and then somebody says, well, all I have is salt. Like, do they say, well, then you don't have any spices?
I think that they are considered distinct categories.
Okay.
But I would have to go and read it in the Aramaic to be able to. I mean, they're different words. You find salt in the spice section at the grocery store now.
Right.
But one is like necessary for life and plumbed out of the Dead Sea, by the way, by the Romans. But yeah, okay. So that's the idea. Torah is the salt, Mishnah is the pepper, Gemara is the spices, which you need of all three to make a delicious meal. But what is Jesus then potentially saying by saying that we are the salt? Jesus is the word, right? According to John, jumping gospel there. But we, of course, are invited to be like him as his followers. So what would it look like for us to be Torah in the earth? Anything come to mind, Brent?
Well, I'm just thinking about, sorry, my mind shifted into a different lane, but I'm like, Torah is also considered light.
Okay.
And then Jesus immediately moves in, don't think I came here to abolish Torah.
Right. After he talks about us being the light.
Yeah. So it's great that salt, Torah is considered salt in a way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good
ties
lane.
the whole thing together.
Yeah. So what does it look like for us to be Torah in the earth?
I think of like being a blessing to all nations.
Okay.
In the general sense of, Abraham's call and I mean, not covenant of Abraham necessarily, I guess. Torah being a little bit later than that, but
okay, reminds you of blessing all nations. That's good. If I think about what's in Torah, there is a piece that's covenantal, right? Looping us back to our first interpretation that the Bible Project talks about. But it's also a book of stories written by God, putting God on display, teaching us about who we are and who he is and what the world is about. And it also has a lot of instructions about how to live. And so if we are supposed to be Torah in the earth, therefore, would it not behoove us to tell stories that radiate God into the world and to live in such a way that others know how to experience the eternal life that we are modeling?
Yeah, and thinking of Torah as salt and salt as a preservative, like the instructions of God, like if we live by the principles of the Torah, and the instructions of God, then that preserves the earth and preserves life on the earth.
Deuteronomy would certainly agree with you. Lots of blessings and curses in a very concrete, structured way. And some of those do literally have to do with taking care of the planet, right? And letting the ground rest and all of the above.
Funny that you would mention Deuteronomy.
Why is that?
Perhaps the Deuteronomist.
Okay.
Sorry, I've been thinking about documentary hypothesis a lot recently, and so just threw that in there for
Got it.
for the sake
Just
of the conversation.
for a little rankling. All I hear when I think Deuteronomy is the song Old Deuteronomy from the musical Cats. So you and I are different people,
Yes.
in case that wasn't already clear.
I try to think as little as possible about Cats.
I haven't seen the new one. This is just the
Cats the musical, Cats the animal, anything. I try to think as little as possible.
I hear you and I respect it.
Thank you.
Okay. Would you mind reading for us our last take here? Take number 4 of these different interpretations, or 5 if we include the Pashats at the beginning, because why not? Pashats can be good and helpful too.
Well, we're talking a lot about Torah, so we do need 5.
Torah.
So I am actually outside of Torah. I'm in 2 Kings 2
Yes.
in the King James Version, just for kicks. And the men of the city said unto Elisha, Behold, I pray thee, the situation of this city is pleasant, as my Lord seeth. But the water is not, and the ground barren. And he said, Bring me a new cruse. Cruse? What is that word?
Vessel.
And he said, Bring me a new vessel, sure, and put salt therein. And they brought it to him. And he went forth unto the spring of the waters, and cast the salt in there, and said, Thus saith the Lord, I have healed these waters. There shall not be from thence any more death or barren land. So the waters were healed unto this day, according to the saying of Elisha, which he spake.
Okay, so who is Elisha's rabbi?
Elijah.
That's right, Eliyahu. And who is paralleled by Jesus with Eliyahu?
Who is paralleled?
Who does Jesus refer to as?
Oh, John the Baptist.
Right.
Yes.
And we have postulated previously that Jesus learned from John the Baptist.
Indeed, yes.
Great. So we're all set up here. In the story, by the way, Eliyahu has just ascended into heaven / died, depending on what your perspective is on that story. I've heard it taught that he's died and everybody dies and is carried away in a chariot of fire. And it just so happens that Elisha was allowed to see it happen because of what it says in the Hebrew. And I'm here for it. But anyway, beyond the scope, Elisha, this has just happened, and he's approached by these sons of the prophets who have been, by the way, harassing him for the last while, telling him that they know that Eliyahu is about to die. And then it says that the men of the city come and they tell him that there's a problem with the earth, right? The city is pleasant, but the water is bad and the land, therefore, unfruitful. And he says, Bring me a vessel and put salt in it. Ding, 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 ding. So when they do, thus says the Lord, I have made this water wholesome. Henceforth, neither death nor barrenness of the land shall come from it. So what's the salt accomplishing there on behalf of the earth?
It's healing the water, which seems strange because I feel like if you put a bunch of salt in the water, then there's not as much stuff you can do with it.
Yes. Definitely one of the miracles of Elisha, I think, is the point there. His double portion situation is kicking off well.
But is it actually salt, or did they put a Torah scroll in the vessel?
Oh, wow. That is a different direction. I'm pretty sure that would ruin the Torah scroll, but you never know. That would be cool.
It's a miracle. It needs to happen either way. So
I guess. Yeah, as long as miracles are going, sure, why not toss the most precious object your community has?
I can imagine the response being pretty similar, whether he's dumping a bunch of salt in there or a Torah scroll. Everyone's like, what are you doing?
Right. Only one section of Torah that they would have or be able to afford, most likely.
Deuteronomy, perhaps.
Perhaps. A really old cat is actually what they threw in.
Now that sounds like a good use of a cat.
Lord, help us.
I'm so sorry.
No. No, all right. So, okay. So the throwing of salt or Torah or a cat into the water succeeds in healing it counterintuitively, absurdly, one might say, just like these teachings of Jesus. And it all reminds me of Ezekiel, where we have the story about the river, right? And the opposite happens of what all the sermons about purity from my childhood anyway talked about, in that when the river water, which is clean, hits the unclean water, what happens to the unclean water?
Well, the river water hits the unclean water, and so then it's unclean river? Right, I might have this backwards.
When the clean river hits the unclean water in this beautiful prophecy from Ezekiel, the unclean water becomes clean. So the opposite of what actually happens with physics and the spreading of unclean particles. And so just like in that story, which is about the kingdom of God and how everywhere the kingdom goes, things become light and healed and clean and good and helpful and useful. In this story, the same thing is happening, where you put something that would mess up the drinkability of the water, mess up the ability to have crops, and it also becomes clean. So if we are the salt of the earth at the city, which is beautiful, but has problems, right? We are invited to be the thing, following the wind of the Spirit, going in unexpected or even absurd places in order to bring healing to the land, that the fruit of the land might be enjoyed by all people.
It's beautiful. I'm also thinking about all the different times where Jesus talks about like clean and unclean things and how one makes the other not or so. And yeah, I wonder if he's referencing this idea in some of those other places too. Okay. My mind is reeling with possibilities.
Reeling. That's great. In my mind, whenever you're like thinking and then you come back to the mic, you're about to say mid. Like, so the fact you come back with stuff you've been pondering is all good news to me.
The whole thing's connected so much more than we realize. And I'd never considered that before.
And apparently there's 6 more, right? This is only 5 takes.
Yeah. I wish I could give you an exhaustive list, but I don't have it.
Me neither. So what are our takeaways? Let's review. We had our Peshat things, which were the ones that I grew up with and I trust other people did too. But then also our more culturally appropriate Peshats of the priests slipping, the newborn babies, the horns of the altars being damaged. And then our first real take, or number 2, was the one about sacrifices and how the earth is a sacrifice and we are the thing setting apart with covenant, making it holy and acceptable, coming out of the Dead Sea, out of darkness and chaos. Then we had a salt of money is charity. So we're imbuing the earth with this eternal value. Just like in that phrase. Our third one is Torah is salt, Mishnah is pepper, Gemara is the spices. So therefore we're supposed to be Torah in the earth, telling stories about God and one another and the world that brings life wherever we go and models it. And then we have Elisha healing the earth with salt, counterintuitively, perhaps even absurdly. And yet it works because it was the Spirit's idea. So our takeaways from this, in all of these stories, and all of these different pictures or glimpses of ideas about what Jesus might be talking about here, we are not the sacrifice, right? We're not the land that's being healed, which might sound more familiar to us, especially in our individualist takes on the gospel. But we are the thing that's being added to what's already there. And there's nothing that salt needs to do. There's no 12-step program to make salt be salty. There's no discipleship pathway. And it's not that those things aren't good and helpful and necessary, but in this particular parable or this particular teaching, it is simply salt being that does the thing, right? That makes the sacrifice holy, that heals the land. And so I think there's an invitation here that when we're making space for God, when we're following the Spirit dwelling within us, that we can remember that there's not necessarily a step or a program or something we need to do in order to effectuate this healing to the land, this holying of the land, but rather we can just be wherever we are. And again, as long as we're following the Spirit, that just being is what accomplishes what God wants for us and for the earth.
I think in the salt metaphor draft, my top pick would be salt as Torah.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
it goes with the other ones.
Yeah, it fits. Yeah, fits with the whole pack. And I was realizing that like immediately before this, at the end of the Beatitudes, he's like, men persecuted the prophets who were before you. Then he goes on to talk about salt and light, both potentially Torah metaphors. Right. And then goes on to say, I've not come to abolish the law and the prophets.
Right.
So I kind of like how that all fits together. But
for sure,
as you said, you like all of these.
Yeah.
And I think they are all useful. And
string the pearls, man.
It would not surprise me one bit if Jesus is referencing many of them, if not all of them, in some way.
The joys of being connected to an infinite mind, having infinite meanings. So if in this, all of these different ideas, the point is us just being Torah, being salt, being something holy, then the exhortation from Jesus clicks into place a little bit more for me, that if we don't manage just to rest in our identity and be rooted and grounded in who God says that we are and trust that He is working in whatever context we find ourselves, when we fail to do that, when we fail to uphold our identity, that is how we end up poisoning the world. So the stakes are still high, right? Because if you're like, let it be, you're like, oh, okay, great. I can just like exist and do my own thing and all click into place. Yes, but also make sure that we are doing that work and creating that space and following the Spirit and being rooted in that identity in Christ. Because when we forget who we are and we start stepping outside of the path, the eternal value, right, in the Salt of Money is Charity teaching, that's when we end up failing to be useful and end up poisoning the earth as we're ground down by people treading on by.
I think once again of the Torah metaphor and the general idea of Bema being to get the text in us. And right. if the salt has lost its taste, if there is no Torah in us.
Good stuff, Brent.
Okay, well, clearly many things to continue pondering. So many possibilities that you've given us today.
I would apologize for ending on a dramatic or darker note of warning, but that's what Jesus does in this verse. So
there you go. Yeah.
No longer good for anything.
Just following in the steps of your rabbi. I like it.
That's right.
Okay. Well, you can go to BehemothDiscipleship.com to find the show notes for this episode. We've got a couple of things we referenced. You can also find groups and events and get in touch with us. Everything is on the website. So thanks for joining us on the Behemoth Podcast. We'll talk to you again soon.